can start off the second session. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nigel. Thanks to everyone who's organised today. I always really enjoy these events, and it's a great pleasure to share with you some of the wee things that we've been doing. What I'm really going to talk about today is a few different, really sort of easy, time-unintensive ways that we've used to make our research a bit more public-facing and a bit more sort of publicly available, publicly engaged, which I hope sort of meets a bit more, sort of sits more than my usual stuff with the remit of applying social science within a civic university. So I'll just focus on one type of task and one of our theoretical and practical questions that we try to answer with our research. So that is the issue of the use of photographic identification. When you go to, so in this example, the border, you're presenting an image of yourself on your passport to someone who's never seen you before, and their task is to compare that image, which could be up to 10 years old, with the face of a probably sweaty, annoyed, tired person standing in front of them. And it turns out that actually, that's not a very easy task. So a lot of our research has been focused on disentangling what happens when we recognise someone that we're familiar with, compared to what happens when we're looking at the face of someone that we're unfamiliar with. So for the border officer, this is always an unfamiliar face recognition task. It turns out that's a really difficult task to carry out successfully, and no amount of training or years in a job such as being a passport controller actually seems to help you get any better at that. So our question is, well, if we can't train people to get better, maybe can we change photo ID and actually look at the way that we're using it or the types of images that we're presenting on photo ID documents to make that process of unfamiliar face recognition a little easier. So as an example of that, hands up if you think that the lady expertly photoshopped onto this image here is the lady shown in the passport photo. How many people think that that's the same person? Hands up, a few. Well, you're wrong because the person in the passport photo is me, but that's an old passport photo, I know. Here's my current passport photo, and that serves purely as a function to show you that it's not just you that looks like a serial killer in your passport photo. So one of the things that we do when we're talking about unfamiliar face recognition is we always present photographs on a computer screen, and we'd ask our participants to just come in and endlessly compare two images on a computer screen and say, are these the same person or two different people? How about these ones? How about these ones? And that gets, I guess, to the practical issue of passport issuing. So that's what, when you apply for a new passport, that's what the passport issuing office are doing. They're comparing this new image that you've submitted to them with old passport images of you. So that's one stage of the real applied question of the use of photo ID. But of course, the second stage that I began with is the actual use of that image to compare it to a live person. Now, of course, it's much more difficult to do research where you're comparing a photo to a live person because you need lots and lots of live people and their photos. But that's something that we've been trying to do more recently and actually using our students to help. So as part of the psychology degree programme, students come to us in groups of 6 or 7 in their second year, and they complete a research skills project. So the project is from start to finish, designing it, designing stimuli, collecting data, analysing the data, and writing a report. So what we've been doing is asking some of our research skills students if they want to get involved with our research by helping us to design a live matching task, and that's exactly what we've done. So what we did was we had, in the end, 50 models on this task, so 50 students who actually had some input into the design and did this experiment. And what they did was they went out on campus and they were armed with a photograph of them or not them and someone who looks a bit like them, and they just said, is this me? So it's like a 2-minute psychology experiment, everyone's dream. And we can collect real data on what people are doing when they're comparing a passport-style photo to a photo of the person's face. There exists in the eyewitness testimony literature, which is, I guess, related to what we do, this idea of a live superiority hypothesis. So people think, if you gave me what they call in Australia a photo board, so a lineup that's just on paper, one image per person, or you gave me what we use in the UK, a Viper video, where the suspects all sort of turn their heads this way, or you gave me a live lineup of all of the lineup members standing in front of me. People just intuit that they'd be a lot better at this task when it's a live situation and they're able to see the real live people. And what we found using our matching task in this live situation is that people were about 80% accurate across trials where it was the same person and combined with where it's a different person. And that is actually bob on the number that we get from a standardized test in the face literature when people are doing this task at a computer screen. People are 80% accurate. So that sounds all right until you start to think, well, hold on, 80% accuracy in the context of, you know, a big airport like Heathrow, that's 20% errors every day. That's 20% of people getting through on the wrong passport or being unnecessarily questioned about why they're using a passport when it does show them. So there isn't a live superiority hypothesis or a live superiority effect here. We find exactly the same effects when we actually take this out into the world and test real people as we do in the lab on computer screens. That's not a reason to stop going out into the world and testing people, though, I think. There's more questions that we can ask about face recognition when you're comparing a photo to a person, and we'll get more rich data by continuing to do that than just focusing on people at computer screens. So that's one aspect of what we're doing, is sort of getting out into the world and testing real people. Another aspect of grabbing people's attention with your research. I wouldn't recommend this with every paper. So when you're doing something that's, you know, theoretical and theoretically interesting, and you want to be making your mark theoretically, don't give it a fun title. But if it is just a fun study showing an effect, so here we did the exact same sort of face matching task using photos of people with and without glasses. And we thought, well, this is never going to be a huge theoretical paper. Let's call it something fun, and let's use the press office. And this is something that I'd really encourage everyone to do. So we called it, well, Disguising Superman. His most famous disguise is he pops on a pair of glasses. And what our research showed was that actually maybe that's not so ridiculous. When you're comparing a photo with glasses to a photo without glasses, people make significantly more errors. So maybe that's not the silly disguise that we always think. But we called it Disguising Superman, and we wrote to the press office and said, you know, could you help us come up with a press release about this? We think people might find this interesting. We've called it something fun. And they did, and it was absolutely brilliant. A great press release went out, and it ended up being featured on QI with people of my generation might recognise Terry Hatcher from this blurry image. So actual Lois Lane discussing our work on QI, which was quite cool. So that's one way of sort of engaging the public in a sort of really low level. It's kind of gone into their subconscious while they're watching Sandy Talks Big. Another way, on the back of that paper, we wrote, my colleague Robin Kramer and I, who's also in the School of Psychology here, wrote an article for the website The Conversation. Only academics can write for The Conversation, but they help you sort of do it in a really accessible way. So their tagline is academic rigor, journalistic flair. All you have to do is pitch, you know, this is the sort of article I would write, this is the sort of topic I would cover, and they'll pretty much let you write it. You'll give academic references throughout the article. So this was published late 2016, and the last time I checked it had over 13,000 reads. So it's a really good way of getting your message out there. And we just told a little story about face recognition and why it's difficult. And I'd urge everyone to have a look at The Conversation and consider if that might be a good outlet for your stuff. It's read by journalists, science journalists, but it's also read by a lot of members of the public and even policymakers. So something that's slightly, my thunder's slightly been stolen on this in the highlights reel that was going on as we came into the room. But this is another example of taking what's actually quite a sort of boring computational point about what happens when we take multiple images with different levels of low-level noise and statistically average them together. What happens is we get a better image. But instead of saying it that way, all we did was say, well, this is enhancing CCTV, right? Taking loads of low-level images that are kind of pixelated and a bit grainy, like you might see on CCTV. So we called it enhancing CCTV, and again, we wrote to the press office, do use them, honestly. The things that they put out are absolutely brilliant and really good summaries of the research. So what happened was a bit bizarre. A couple of years after, maybe a year after this was published, I was dealing with some emails from a fraught tutee when my phone rang, and I thought, oh, this will be a fine distraction. I picked up the phone, and the person on the other end of the phone said, hi, my name's Anna, and I'm calling from BBC's Crime Watch Roadshow. I've just come across a press release on your paper about enhancing CCTV. Can you tell me what that project was about? Now that's a test, right? So at that moment I thought, well actually I can't really remember what that project was about. So I'll give you my pre-prepared 20 seconds of, well this is what I do and why you should be really interested in it, while I frantically click in my computer to find the PDF of the paper to make sure that I don't make up something that we did in the paper. And it turned out, yeah, I was right, it was a test. So by having that pre-prepared sort of 20 seconds of chat about what my research is and why you should care about it, I'd managed to hook her in so she didn't just hang up on me and click down the next list of people that might be interested. And so from just in virtue of having a sort of engaging enough title that might make people interested, some good press releases written by the press office here, and by having a pre-prepared 20 seconds, I met Rav, and it was really fun. So, you know, you never know what's going to happen when your phone rings, so you should always be prepared. So, to give me a bit of a break from talking, what I want you to do is think about that. What would you say if your phone rang and someone said, tell me about either this paper that you wrote, or tell me about what you do? How will you engage them in 20 seconds to make sure that they don't hang up on you and scroll down the list and go to the next person? Have a think about that. I'd like you, I've tweeted mine, once I reminded myself what the hashtag was that I came up with. So have a go at this, please, and tweet it with hashtag #CossElevatorPitch. Actually, since I only have a couple of minutes left, I won't stop talking to let you do that, but please do consider doing this in one of the breaks. I think it's not silly, it is genuinely a good idea to have something like that pre-prepared that you can just blurb out at some point. Okay, the last thing that I'd like to talk about engaging publics with research is just public-facing dissemination. So our tasks are, you know, everyone has a face, and you say to them face recognition, and they go, I have a face, I know about that, and they're already interested. But the way that we sort of use our research to get younger audiences and different publics involved is we just make them into games. Do you want to play our passport control game? It's a face matching task, but we call it a game, and that makes it infinitely more interesting. So we've been to, here's our technician Todd doing one of our tasks at Lights, and here's Robin Kramer demonstrating one of our tasks at an event that I ran at the Skegness Aquarium, actually for the ESRC's Festival of Social Sciences. We've had young carers in through doing some of our tasks. We've ran a Newton Academy Girls in Science Day as well, just through gamifying our things. And the last thing to say about speaking with the public is often the unexpected happens. People come up with questions that you hadn't thought of, and they can inspire your next lot of research, and that's exactly what's happened to us at some of these public-facing events. People have asked questions about, well, hold on, what about facial recognition technology? How does that actually work? Is what I'm reading in the papers really happening? Are the Met really doing this? And so I recently got a small grant from the British Academy to actually look at these questions that people are genuinely asking us. And the public-facing part of this is my fantastic research assistant, Charlotte, who's cringing and waving, has been running focus groups. We're running focus groups in Lincoln, in Beijing, and in Sydney to look at, across the world, what are people's different attitudes towards facial recognition technology in countries that use it to a different extent. So it's just another way of learning what the public's questions are and embedding that in your research. Finally, Nigel's given us a couple of really nice plugs for Pint of Science. So I led the first Pint of Science team at Lincoln, and we will be doing it again. It was a raving success. Many people in this room attended and gave talks, so thank you very much. As part of Pint of Science, we also ran a public talk from an astronaut, and that's some of the feedback from that on the infographic there. If you are interested, please do consider giving a talk at Pint of Science, or email me if you'd like to be part of the organising team. We always need more people, so please do consider that. Pint of Science is just public, engaging talks in pubs. What could be better? So I've sort of been thinking about what would be my top tips then for everyone. Take it out of the lab, just get out of the lab, like those Is This Me tests that we were doing with our students. You might find different results than you do in the lab. Turn things into a game. It sounds much more appealing if you call it a game than a task or a test. Give an applied article a fun title, send it to the press office. Actually consult the public about what are their questions related to your research. And I know that sounds really obvious, but often we focus on telling them what we know instead of asking them what they want to know. And I think that can be quite surprising and interesting. Prepare your elevator pitch and use that hashtag #CossElevatorPitch. It's on my Twitter if you can't find it. And join Pint of Science. Do consider giving a talk or helping us out with that. Thank you. These are all the people.